Time flies when you're having fun. Did you all learn a lot thus far? It is hard, as I think Ellen said this last time. When you're in the midst of it, in the throes of it, you're like, what was I supposed to do? Forgot. How am I supposed to approach this? He's going to talk about this at the very end, that, we're all in the midst of it together, and we're not going to do it perfectly, and everything will be okay.
One thing that has been nice is, even if I didn't do it right, like something will happen, and then after the fact, when the opportunity's gone, I'll like reflect and be like, oh, we should have done it this way. But it's a learning process. It's like, at least now I know, so then the next opportunity comes, I can hopefully do it that way.
Yes. And it is a lifelong process. It really, really is. And so I don't think parenting ends when the kids grow up. It's going to continue. In fact, I think one of the great challenges is learning how to be an adult child. To parents who are now slowly becoming children, do you know what I mean? You probably, I don't know if some, are you facing that at all?
Not yet.
No? Are you facing that at all? You will, right? Give it another, how old are your parents generally?
60. Well, actually, I do feel like, I've had to, they're not planners, so I feel like I have to plan everything and help them do steps a lot.
Once they start deteriorating in terms of their physical health, it really, a lot of things that you didn't ever think through for parents, some of the principles that you're learning today, interestingly enough, you'll be applying them for your parents. And if they get it, they will really want that. But that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother class. So I think what you'll find is that a lot of things that we're talking about learning, it's very applicable in a lot of contexts. And marriage is definitely one of them. A lot of the things that are principles for parenting are also the same principles for marriage. So some things to consider. Anyway, any questions before we begin?
Is this longer since it's the last tape? Or
No, it's about the same length. About the same length. So, okay, we are going to begin.
There's always a really long
lag.
How about a tendency toward legalism? I don't mean that teenagers love God's law. I mean they tend to be Philadelphia lawyers. They tend to be very oriented to boundaries. They want to know where the boundaries are. They tend to debate your vocabulary. Have you had that happen? No, Mom, that's not exactly what you said. What you said was, if your child is debating vocabulary, it's not because they love God's law. It's because they're trying to find a place to get through it. They want to slip between your words. Now, think about what's going on there. Let me give you a physical picture. Let's just say you have a yard. Inside of that yard are all the good, true, and beautiful things a human being should want. There's a chain link fence, and outside of that yard is danger. You with me in the picture? And you have a teenager who's pressing his face against the fence so much that he's got fence marks in his face. Now, what is that teenager believing? Can you tell me? You can talk. What's he believing? That the good stuff is out there. You would be shocked to know how many teenagers actually feel disadvantaged because they live in a family of faith. Because they think the very nature of being there will keep them from the good stuff. Now that means the issue isn't just a rebellion to authority. The issue is the belief of a lie. And I think we're very skilled at responding to issues of falsehood with responses of authority. We just crank up authority. So watch. What if I make the fence 5 fences thick? Have I solved the problem? What if I make the fence 20 feet high? Have I solved the problem? Listen, if your teenager believes the good stuff is out there, he's going. And you won't be smart enough to make him a prisoner. Trust me. I had a father who had a teenage son who just believed that. And so they did something, it's pretty shocking. They would lock him in his room every night at 9 o'clock. That's responding, using an authority response to a falsehood issue. He sat there one night and realized, because he looked at the back of his door so much, that if he popped off the trim, the pins of the door would be exposed. And so over the next couple days, he snuck into his room the requisite tools, eased the molding around the door off, and in the middle of the night, he popped the pins off the door and took off the door. Also, he took off the lock set, but he wasn't done. He took off every handle and every lock set of every door in the entire house, very quietly in the middle of the night. Put them in a plastic bag, put the plastic bag in a box, took the box down the street to an empty field, dug a hole, buried them, and went back to bed. His dad woke up in the morning. He almost fell through the door. Went for the bathroom. Even the front and back door had no handles on them. Now, what does that demonstrate? You haven't dealt with the issue. This child is believing something that's dangerous. You got to get at the belief system. And you have opportunity to do that. What you need to do is turn your teenager again and again to the middle of the yard and show how God's way is gorgeous, it's beautiful. Wouldn't you like to live in a place where there was no stealing, there was no lying, there was no adultery, there was no danger, there was no racism, there were no ugly words said, everybody was peaceful, gentle, kind, loving, patient. Wouldn't that be beautiful? That's the world God chose for us. If you're having an anniversary, Mom and Dad, don't just celebrate the glory of your love. Talk about God. Talk about the fact without God's wisdom and God's grace, you couldn't have possibly lived with one another. I'm serious. Celebrate God. Celebrate the beauty of a long-term marriage. What it's like to live with somebody that you know this well, that you love this much. Again and again and again, point yourself, your child, your teenage boy or girl to the beauty of God's way. Counteract that lie that they're so tempted to believe. Third, teens tend to be unwise in the choice of companions. A lot said about this in Proverbs. You know, in the early days, you're the gatekeeper. No one enters the life of your child that you haven't improved. But there comes a day when, with a larger, let's say high school, the child working a job, their ability to drive, they now acquire friends that you don't know. That's a very significant thing. And in some way, those relationships will always be influential. What are you going to do about that? Well, you don't want to give in to parental fear and say and do things that drive that under the table. You don't want to say to your child, you know, only a loser hangs around with losers. That's probably not going to open up the conversation. I want to suggest something to you that I think can be very powerful. Make your home the most hospitable place in your community. Get a widescreen television with a Wii system. It's a good investment. Have plenty of snacks. have plenty of things to drink. Have an open door policy. Moms, hear me. Don't worry about the couch. Don't worry about the carpet. If your carpet gets stained, those are glorious redemptive stains. Praise Jesus for the stains. If your couch gets broken, you can buy a new couch, but you cannot replace the soul of your teenager. I think there are times in our desire to have a beautiful surrounding to live in, we actually treat physical furniture as being more important than our own children. I can tell you for sure, if you make your home a hospitable place, it'll get damaged. Have the right sense of values. You can patch the hole in the sheetrock. And you can praise God that when that little skirmish took place, you were there and you were able to enter in and you were able to impart wisdom at that moment. And you're patching that and you're sort of smiling because you remember the good thing that happened as the result of that. Whole different way of living. One of the best investments Lowell and I made, we had boys who were very avid and skilled skateboarders, was to build a half pipe in our backyard. It was ugly. Our entire yard was wood. You could barely get around the sides of this thing. Our neighbors were terrified. And so we told the boys would never skate before 10 o'clock in the morning, and they would never skate after 8 o'clock at night. But that brought that world to our door. And because it was dangerous, the boys couldn't skate until their parents had seen the ramp and signed an insurance release form. So we met all the families. It was wonderful. We spent as much time out there with the guys, and there were so many times when I could enter into relational things that were going on. On a Saturday, we'd go out and we'd buy 15 pounds of hamburger, and we'd just make hamburgers all morning. And at noon, we'd just bring out trays of hamburgers and give these to these boys. They loved being at our place. And the amount of things that we preserved our boys from, and the amount of things that we were able to be involved in because we were willing to lose our yard for something more important, just cannot be estimated. I have this experience. It's a beautiful experience, and it happens to me once in a while. I live right down in Center City, Philadelphia, and I walk a lot down there, and I'll be walking down the street, and now a grown man will call my name. I'll hear, Mr. Tripp, Mr. Tripp. The last time it happened, it was a guy in a suit and a briefcase. And he came over to me, he dropped his briefcase, he threw his arms around me, he says, my name's Hector. I skated on your ramp. Thank you, thank you, thank you for what you did for us. I'm weeping. Such a little easy decision. When they left the home, we tore down the ramp, put in a beautiful English cobblestone patio, and praised God for his existence. But we love that ramp. And our kids still talk about that. They still love to look at the pictures. And when they do, they just tell stories. Make yourself part of this thing. Make your place a hospitable, wonderful place to be. Fourth thing, teens are particularly susceptible to sexual temptation. We all know that sometime between 10 and 20 whatever, there's massive social and physical development. You put an 8-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl in t-shirt and jeans, they look pretty much alike. You put a 17-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl in t-shirt and jeans, they don't look at all alike. And that development is not an evil thing, it's part of God's design, but it's a dangerous thing in a fallen world. An 8-year-old boy will be convinced that girls have cooties. They don't know what they are, but they don't want them. A 17-year-old boy magically becomes a cootie consumer. He doesn't know what they are, but he's strangely attracted to them. Now, I want you to hear what I'm going to say. All this is happening for us in a world that's gone sexually insane. Brothers and sisters, there's no more sanity out there. It's nuts. It's craziness. You can barely listen to a CD. You can barely watch a DVD, read a magazine, go to a mall without somehow having your morals assaulted. We are so obsessed with sexuality that we are taking knives to the chests of our daughters and putting plasticine substances inside of them so they have a stronger sexual self. You would be shocked if you read the figures of the amount of breast augmentations happen every year in Western culture. We're crazy. Those cultures that stretch the neck in Africa or pull down the ears, or Asian cultures that bound the feet to say small, we would call primitive. We're just as primitive. We obsess over the shape of a nose or the size of an ear. We're nuts. We're crazy. We're obsessed. Our daughters are starving themselves to death. It's no longer sexual issues alone. It's now a fundamental redefinition of human identity. Human identity is more about appearance than character. That's craziness. And don't think you'll protect your boys and girls from it. You won't. There's never been a culture where young girls are more fearful of the shape of their body and the shape of their face than ever before. There's no culture of young men who have been taught to objectify women as objects of pleasure than our culture has. There are masses of teenage boys who are already addicted to internet pornography. I hear the stories again and again and again. Meanwhile, the family and the church is sitting strangely silent. The world's talking constantly, and we sit in embarrassment and silence. Listen, sex was created by our God. This is our stuff. We get what it's about. We get what it's for. We should be the ones who are talking. We've given it away. Couple examples that are just everyday examples. I was in Old Navy. Now, you know this is not a radical store. I was with my 13-year-old son buying him a pair of khakis. And I looked across the aisle, and there was a rack for little girls, 5, 6, so you know the size of the girl. And it was a micro mini skirt and a halter top. I was immediately enraged. How can you put a little girl in that outfit and ever expect that she's going to have a sense of self? You're telling her, be an object because that's what you were made for. I wanted to rip down the rack. Fortunately, I had a 13-year-old boy with me who kept saying, Dad, you're not going to do something, are you? And he helped me to be sane. My daughter got an unexpected gift in the mail one Christmas. Tore open the box, given to her by a girlfriend at her Christian school. And when she opened it up, it was one of those weird back of a magazine breast development kits. And she said, Dad, isn't this weird? My friend wanted to get me something for Christmas, and all she could think of was, poor Nicole, her breasts are too small. There are girls represented by this family that are already in the process of giving away their bodies. There are girls that are much more focused on physical appearance than they are the character of their hearts. There are girls who don't know how to hold out to be respected for their mind and their heart, not just the shape of their body, the size of their nose, and the color of their hair. Are you listening to me? Our boys and girls need us. They need us. Dads, look at me. Your boys need you. And they don't need you to have one creepy, quasi-embarrassed conversation about sex that you're never going to have again. They need you to be humble and loving and patient, to open up the topic and keep it open, because the temptations of a 13-year-old boy are different from the temptations of a 15-year-old boy, are different from the temptations of a 17-year-old boy, are different from the temptations of a 19-year-old boy. We need to have an open conversation. We need to talk. Forget your own embarrassment. Forget your own comfort. Get out there and help your boys. Moms, your girls need you. They need you not just to teach them how to wear makeup, but teach them what it means to be respected for what's inside of me, not just outside of me, and the dramatic moral importance of saying no. If that's what it takes to get your acceptance, I won't do it. We are losing the battle. You need to stand up and say, you will not consume this trash. If your children, if your teenagers got their enjoyment the last several months of watching Jersey Shore, you familiar with what I'm talking about? You have failed your children. Because it's seductive, immoral trash that should never be consumed. Now, I've spoken pretty straight with you, haven't I? My purpose is not to beat you up. I have an enormous respect for your struggle. But I am very concerned that we're silent while the world is screaming, 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 and we're losing the battle. We will not lose this battle. We will not lose this battle. We will stand up and we will take back what belongs to our God. Do that for your kids. Fifth thing, your teens tend to lack eschatological perspective. Just a fun way of saying they don't tend to look at the long view of things. Teens tend to live in a bubble, and it is now. And so there's two mentalities that you want to impart to your teenager. First is a harvest mentality. God says, the Bible says, God is not mocked. Whatever you plant, you will harvest. And so the teenagers need to know, every day I'm planting seeds that I will someday harvest, and every day I'm harvesting seeds that I previously planted. It's your job to make that seed plant connection for them. Now, the reason that's important is teenagers are very good at denying their own harvest. You got to hear this story. My daughter comes home one day and she says, Dad, I got to talk to you about my report card. You know right away that's bad news. If it needs a preamble, it's bad news. So I said, we'll talk. She says, I got a D in English, happens to be the language that she speaks. But I want you to know I got the highest D in class. Don't you love it? And she says, I know why. It's this teacher. He's learning to teach on us. The smart kids barely got B's and C's. I'm thinking, isn't this wonderful? Under the weight of this man's teaching and ability, my daughter got the highest D in class. We had to post it on the refrigerator. We had to call Grandma. We had to go out to eat in celebration. As she's standing there talking to me, I realize she's not just pulling the wool over my eyes, she believes it. Somewhere between when that report card was given and she got it home, she was able to convince herself that it had nothing to do with her. Your job is to make those seed plant connections for your teenager. You do that patiently, you do that lovingly, you do that with grace, but you must do that. Second mentality is a treasure mentality. My teenager needs to know that everywhere he goes, everything he does, somehow, some way, is related to the treasures of his heart. You are always naming something as your treasure. You are always naming things as important. That means you have values. Let me say it this way. Your teenager's behavior in any situation is his attempt to get what's important to him out of it. And so you need to have treasure conversations. You need to ask the question, what are you investing in? And what is the return going to be? What are you investing in? What is the return going to be? The purpose of those conversations is not accusation. The purpose of those conversations is insight. Harvest and treasure, two very, very important mentalities for a teenager. And the last one is really the summary of everything I've said to you. Teenagers tend to lack heart awareness. They not only tend to be blind, they tend to be blind to their blindness. And so you are still doing what we talked about in the beginning. You're working any way you can to be an instrument of seeing. You're asking the question again and again, let me give it to you. What is it that God wants this teenager to see right now, and how can I help him see it? What is it that God wants this teenager to see right now, and how can I help him see it? Now, I want you to do something with me, because I want to talk to you personally. I want you to close your notes, put down your pencils. I want to say a couple things to you here at the end. Maybe some of you right now are just overwhelmed. You're just thinking, there's no way I'm ever going to remember all this stuff. I'm going to be hurting my children. Well, hear this. God is not so unkind as to ever give you a task without giving you the wherewithal to do it. If God puts a Red Sea in front of you and he means for you to cross it, he's going to build a bridge, he's going to send a boat, he's going to give you the ability to swim, or he's going to part the waters. Don't give in to fear. Step forward in faith, believing God will give you what you need to do what he's called for you to do. Some of you are now filled with regret. You thought, if I'd only heard this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Well, there's a couple of things I can say. Always trust God's timing. God's timing's always right. You're here this weekend because he knows it's the right time for you to hear and to understand. There's a second thing. We really do believe that the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ is a message of fresh starts and new beginnings. That God will restore that which the locusts have eaten. You can have fresh starts. Some of you need to go to your kids and say, we did it the wrong way. And I'd like to start anew with you. There's some things I need to confess to you. Would you like to work with me to do this thing that we do together in a better way? Let me summarize what this day is about with this visual picture. God is in the business of painting his grace on the canvas of human souls. There'll be a day when that entire canvas is a symbol of souls of every culture, every language group, every location on the globe, every ethnic group, men, women, boys and girls from every period of history. When we see the canvas of the glory of God's grace, we won't be able to do anything but worship. Now, hear what I'm about to say you're God's brushes. God would wipe you, Mom, across the palette of His grace, and through you paint His transforming grace on the heart of your children. God would pick you up, Dad, and wipe you across the palette of His grace, and through you paint His grace on the canvas of the hearts of your children. Here's the single issue of this weekend. Check it out. Are you a soft brush in His redemptive hands? Have you ever tried to paint with a hard brush that wasn't taken care of? It doesn't pick up the paint very well, and it scratches the very surface it was meant to make beautiful. I have to say this. There are hard brush dads in this room. You had hard brush moments this week. And your bristles need to be softened by that very same grace so that you'd be a more effective carrier of that grace to the hearts of your children. Dads, look at me. Where do your bristles need to be softened? There are hard brush moms in this room. You had hard brush moments this week. And your bristles need to be softened by that very same grace so you can effectively carry that grace to the hearts of your children. Moms, look at me. Where do your bristles need to be softened? The Bible says in that final day, as we're celebrating in worship, so loudly that we're literally screaming in worship like the cracks of thunder, like the sound of mighty rushing rapids where you can't hear yourself think. A voice will speak, and it will say, "Well done, good and faithful servants." You ready for this? God will thank His brushes. Monet never did that. Rembrandt never did that. Picasso never did that. But God did that. Oh, that we would be soft brushes in His redemptive hands, so that grace will be carried in ways that transform the hearts of our children. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for the beauty, clarity, practicality of your word. We would say to you that we love you, but our greatest, fullest joy in life is that we've been loved by you. May we be, by that love and by that grace, soft brushes in your transforming and redemptive hands. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless.
Sorry, I was saying I got back from helping Coach Elizabeth's team, so hence my clothing. But that's okay. I know you don't judge me on the basis of that, or maybe you think I'm better actually because of that. Let's cut this out. Okay, so anyone have a hard brush week? You understand this analogy?
I mean, I kind of do, but I don't really get it.
You know, like when have you ever had to use the you paint and you don't clean it?
You know, I know that part, but
Yeah.
I have to compare it, you know.
And so the idea is that if, let's say, your children is the canvas, and God wants you to use a picture of His grace on the hearts of your children, and He's using you to do that, to draw His grace. But if you are so hardened to the Lord, then instead of drawing this beautiful picture, you actually scratch the canvas. In other words, you negatively impact that person's heart, the child. And so therefore, I know for those of us who maybe are not artistes, it's not necessarily the most appropriate illustration. But I think the point is that we have an opportunity where either going to be a means of God's grace to our children, or we're going to perhaps lead our children away from the Lord because of the way that we present Him to them. We are essentially our children's greatest picture of God. More than the church, more than anything that they'll experience, it's you. And that's sobering, right? I mean, that's a hard thing to hear, but that is the fact. That's what He's done. So, yeah. So again, that's not easy to hear, but we'll go through some of the things that he talked about. Legalism. Legalism. You know, have you ever thought about your kids, especially, and for those of us who have teens, but we'll go down the line all the way, whether you have teens or younger children, do you ever think of them as legalists? And have you ever seen their struggles of legalism? In what ways? If you're saying yes, in what ways?
One of them likes to be on a computer, and that child likes to play violent games, which I have never said it's okay.
Okay.
But then he drew back at me and said, well, you watch violent movies that have violence. It's I couldn't say that because it is true.
Well, that might be more of a critique of hypocrisy against you, but I think legalism, meaning in the sense that there's this sense that they debate. Well, I guess in that sense that's true. They're debating the lot lines, and you're right. That's sort of inherent, especially in teenagers, because they're always thinking about the boundaries. And when parents set up boundaries, they're wanting to know, one, how far can I push that boundary? I mean, younger kids do that too, but younger kids don't verbalize it as much, like the ability to process that and rationalize it. But like you're describing, and one of your kids is actually using something against you in a logical argument. Not so easy, huh? Yeah. Dan, you have an instance?
Legalism?
Yeah. Like, do you sense legalism to some extent? Not you to them, but them to you, or them in general.
I guess maybe most recently over dinner I asked them the question, because of this building search, I asked them, would you, talking to my girl, would you be willing to give sacrificially for something like a building grant? And their response wasn't surprising, but I think it kind of highlighted a legalistic kind of response, which was, I think their response was basically not really, because I know there would be people richer than me that wouldn't give. So that kind of tit for tat, if someone's not doing this, I'm not going to do that.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good illustration. Yeah, that is a good illustration. Yeah. Anyone else experience that with younger children? Yeah. Can you recall anything, Julia?
I mean, well, I can't even name one because it's always my part is always. But Stella did that. How come you let her do it? I mean, that's as simple and basic as it goes, right? Yes. I mean, and it's like if you set a law, then it should apply to everybody.
Right. Right. Yeah. The thing is that when I was listening to him talk about this, he's applying it to teenagers, but I don't think this is a teenager thing. I think this is a human thing. And forget about kids. We do it to each other as husband and wife, do it in the church, do it everywhere. And it's been going on for a long time, a very long time. And one of the things that he said is that teenagers often believe that the good stuff is out there, and you're holding me back from it. It could be something that even a younger child experiences. If you set up a certain boundary, when you refuse to allow them to cross that boundary, they feel as though you're holding something back from them, right? You ever experienced that as a parent? When have you heard of that before?
Genesis.
Yeah. When? With Eve?
Yeah.
I know. I mean, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I had a conversation this weekend with somebody, and this person's struggling with the same thing as an adult. I want to experience that out there. Why can't I? And I think for us, we have this false idea that as long as a child is under the protection of a Christian home, they won't experience any desire for things. But that's just simply not true. And if you believe that, you're really misreading Genesis chapter 2. Chapter 3, actually, because in Genesis chapter 3, what was the temptation?
Unknown.
What's that?
The unknown.
Unknown of what? It actually wasn't unknown.
What
did Satan promise?
The knowledge, the possibility of
Yeah.
more.
Actually, it was the knowledge of good and evil. And in fact, Satan says, because you will be like God. So you will be like God. And that really struck Eve and ultimately Adam, right? So I've always, and theologians have really wrestled with this idea. Why did Adam and Eve sin? Because in the end, they had that which is utmost, which is God himself, right? They were in this perfect relationship with God. There was no sin. So how does one go from there? Okay, excuse my theological philosophizing, but how does one go from not sinning when there's never sin in the world to sin suddenly? How does one go from having everything to then saying, I don't have enough? Actually, that's not enough. I want more than that. It's almost hard to grasp that idea, that concept. But the point I wanted to make is this, is that Eve, there was something that she saw that she felt she wanted more than what God had promised to her. And from that time forward, that is always now going to be our greatest temptation. That we think something out there is better and we're missing something. And that what we're missing is worth getting. And we will, as he said, you'll press your face to the fence until you have fence marks on your face because you want that so much. And a teenager, that's what they're going through. That's the world they're going through. Is they start, because it's the first time that they're really, like, if there's a yard of protection as he's talking about, it's the first time they're going outside of the yard, right? Julia, you said bye to Stella because she went to school today. But she's going to come back home. You know, in the end, she has to. There's no choice. But teenagers are slowly pressing that. Do I really need to go back home? And then once they hit 18, they don't even have to come back home. So you have to understand that if you're not dealing with what is going on internally in their heart today, then they're not going to know how to process that inherent feeling that we all have of saying, God is not sufficient, I want more than that. What do you think about that?
I think that you said it from even the first 0 to 5, that kids are like, they're their own God. From them screaming and crying and throwing a tantrum because they want that toy,
yes,
to being a teenager
yes,
and wanting their own way. I mean, it's still all the same heart problem.
But the heart is the same. What's the difference, though, between 0 to 5 and now 13 and up?
Do something like that.
Yeah. Well, definitely the mode of punishment or response and consequence is different as they get older, right? The things that we applied and we were talking about at 0 to 5, you're not doing that anymore at 13 and up. So that clearly is different. Secondly is that what happened with Anne is sort of one of the challenges, is that that child now is able to converse, and they're now rationalizing in a way in which, as an adult, that is a tough, maybe the response is, that's a great response. I need to deal with that myself. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Let's both work on this together. There's a place to say that, but you wouldn't really, if let's say a 3-year-old child said that, they probably first wouldn't say that. Secondly is they might not understand what they're saying. And third, if they did say that, you still would have to work it out, right? You still have to deal with it. So it's hard, but teens definitely are understanding the world around them in a unique way.
Yeah, I feel like we're definitely later in the stages. In the beginning stages, you still have the opportunity to paint the picture that God is a much bigger God and much better God than yourself. And you have more time, you have more room to paint that picture, and the room becomes smaller and smaller as they get older.
Yes, yes. And also influences, right? When they're 0 to 5, I mean, you control their influences, really. Whatever you allow them to have, that's what they have. Hit 13 and 14, 15, suddenly you don't have as much control over those influences. And the scary part is that a lot of parents, because they have not done without being able to think of a better way to put this, they have not done the work at 0 to 12, that now they're trying to make up for it 13 and on, and that's when you're in big trouble. Because it's very hard to undo what you have not done in 0 to 12. If you haven't laid that foundation early on, they're not going to listen to you more as you're going along. So going back to 0 to 12, and for those of you who are in 0 to 12, it's such a significant, important time. You can stave off a lot by what you're teaching and doing today for tomorrow. Any other reflections or thoughts? Comments, questions?
What if your children are older than 12 and you haven't laid the foundation? Let's say a friend of mine hasn't done that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where his last exhortation comes into play.
Yeah.
Right?
God's perfect timing.
Yeah, God's perfect timing. Like, it's not too late. You do what you can. The Lord is sovereign and He's powerful, and He can overcome a lot. Even He knows our sin. So I don't think it's ever it's too late. But if you have the opportunity, though, as some of you do in this room, and some of you in cyberspace, that you would take up that opportunity by actually applying some of the things that we talked about, because it will really, really benefit both that child and you in the long run. What do you think, Dan? Because what else is there then? There's only despair then,
Yeah, I didn't try. I mean, I didn't grow up in a Christian home, and I didn't even really truly understand anything of the gospel until high school.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's never too late.
Yeah.
So look how great she turned out.
Yeah,
We're still in this pair. Wait, aren't you supposed to be saying
Yeah, so I'm still having a hard time with my 4-year-old.
Mhm.
Even last night, I yelled at him for playing with the lights because we were actually, we needed light, and I was trying to talk
Was
to
he
him.
flicking them off and on like this?
Yeah, and John yelled at him, I yelled at him, and he didn't listen. So then I really yelled at him. So then he got very upset, and so all the things that he told me that he shouldn't do. First, he lied to me. He lied to me about something else. And he does that. Then, he hit me or kicked me, not hard, And then he demanded that I apologize to him. And I said, when I said, no, I'm not gonna apologize because I'm not sorry. He just went crazy.
So he demanded you apologize to him for him kicking at you?
No, yelling at him.
Okay.
So, and I did the same thing, spank, and try to talk to him, why did you do that? And, but he's very stubborn, and he, kind of has, he has to have his own ways in many things, and, some things I let go, but, and I've had, since this class, I've had several of this, talks with him, and I don't know if I'm doing it, quite correctly, but in the beginning, I felt like it was kind of working.
Are you're understanding him more though?
Understand what?
Why he's doing what he's doing, what he wants, what does he want, where's he going, what are his concerns? For example, if he's kicking you, why are you kicking him? I mean,
because he kicked me because I said I'm not gonna apologize to him.
Okay, so you're understanding actually a lot more perhaps than if actually you never even ask those questions. Otherwise, it becomes him reacting, you responding and reacting to his reaction, and it just builds off of each other. The thing, Eileen, is that, one, there's no such thing as a perfect system where it's going to work every time. There's no working, actually. It's not okay, follow these 10 steps and you'll have an awesome child. And anytime you see those, I've seen those in those infomercials sometimes, they say, get this cassette and you'll have a perfect child. Have you ever seen those things? It's really crazy. I'm just curious to see what they say. But one thing we know from Scripture's perspective is this is a lifelong process. It's not a one-shot deal. Another thing is patience, persistence, perseverance all the time. You have to be willing to be consistent no matter how hard it is. And it will be hard. And so this is definitely not a recipe for the easy road. It is going to be, but also it's recognizing that, you know, on those instances to be consistent in applying all these things. Because if you're arbitrary, in other words, if on one day I don't feel like doing it because I'm tired, and then the next day I feel, okay, you're going to get this consequence in here, what happens to the child is that they don't know what is expected of them because it seems arbitrary. Why is it that I can get away with this on this day, but suddenly on this day you respond to me this way? Whereas if there's a consistency of you do this, there's going to be this response, this consequence. And you know what? Do you remember when he was talking about teens? This is something that he said, it is one of the most important things that we as parents need to teach our teens. Do you remember what he said when he was talking about it? It's on this same idea. But it's something that was there from 0 to 12, which is that sense of harvest. You know, planting and harvest. The whole point of that is they need to see the long view. And they need to see, the way you teach long view is through consequence, responsibility, right? So that if they do or have an action, that they understand what the consequence of that is. And teenagers, if you think a child has a hard time, if they don't get that as a child, they won't get that as a teenager. But the consequence of a teenager is far worse than a young child. Because with a young child, if they're playing with the lights, the worst thing they can do is break the lights, and it's not that big of a deal. But if a teenager sleeps around and has a baby, that's a pretty big consequence, right? I mean, that will impact the rest of that person's life. So if you can get your child at the earliest of stages to understand when you do this, this happens. And this is what's going to happen for the rest of your life. And I've had those talks with my kids, all of them, on different stages. And I'm constantly having that talk. I talk to Jack about that quite often. Like recently, I say this to him, Jack, you know, one day you're going to, Lord willing, you're going to lead a family. You're going to have a wife. You're going to have children. And obviously, he's 9 years old. I mean, it's not like someone, not a kid who can truly understand this. But I just say it to him over and over again. I say, what you do today, the amount of effort and energy and work you put into this, you're going to see that in your life. And you need to protect your wife. You need to protect your child. You need to provide for him. You need to care for them. I know he doesn't fully understand that. He doesn't grasp that, right? But there are parts where sometimes I feel as though if I say it enough, I really think he'll understand slowly but surely. And there are parts where he does get it a little bit. I think you do that for a really young child, but you need to be able to do that for a teenager. And if you're not doing that regularly for your children, you probably won't do that for a teenager. But for a teenager, if they don't get that, that's where the danger is serious. So consistency, don't give up. That's, I think, the number one thing. Eileen, if you walk away with anything from this class, it's don't lose hope, don't give up. It's really hard. Trust in the Lord. He is gracious. Be gracious to your kids. Gracious means sometimes implementing, sometimes corporal discipline, sometimes recognizing that's a part of it. Have conversations. And I know, don't feel like this doesn't work after 2 shots. You got to give it 10 years. 10 years, you know, give it 10 years. Don't do it after a few times and say, oh, this isn't going to work, because it won't work in a couple of months. It won't. You won't see any change.
You know, also sometimes like you're not at the ideal place or you know, time to discipline them right there and then.
Right.
I mean, I try to if I can, but then in those instances, do you do it later when you get home?
If you really can't, yeah, I think you do it where you come home. And you know, that's harder with a young child because sometimes they can't really process what happened in place X and remember that place Y is they're getting disciplined here, and they're not really connecting. Well, I'm getting disciplined for that. because the young child doesn't really understand that unless usually if it's not subsequent, they don't really get it. So that's something I would say that's a case by case. You need to really assess your own discernment and use your own wisdom and judgment on that. If you feel like they can grasp that there is a sense of this action led to this consequence, then I think it's worth it. If you feel like there isn't, then you might need to have conversations or really try to work it through. And again, I think that's case by case. And yeah. So don't give up. Yeah, I know it's here's another thing is remember that Satan is on the prowl. What I mean by that is that he did try to deceive Eve, and he deceived Eve with making her think that there's something better out there. And remember, that's probably our #1 challenge for teenagers and parenting, but as well as for us in general, is that we always feel like something's better out there for me. I need a better job. I need a different car. I need a new house. I need a new, I need a career change. I need a new husband. I need different kids. I don't want kids anymore, and my life will be okay. So Satan, that is exactly the lie he used to Eve. God's not sufficient for you. He's holding back on you. And your kids think you're holding them back. If you're a parent of teens, they will be tempted to think that you are keeping them from what they really want to experience in life. Isn't that true? Do you feel that? No? In any respect. You got to think that through a little bit. Maybe, I'm thinking, generally I think I have pretty good teenagers. Good. And sometimes good can be bad in its own right, in a certain way. But I wonder if, and I'm always reassessing and reevaluating, is the outward behavior what's going on deep in the heart? And that's something that I don't want to take for granted. Well, just because they're acting a certain way, therefore they're totally get it. I think to do that is to, one, forget the assumptions that Scripture makes about the human soul and heart, which is that we're by nature depraved and by nature self-centered. So therefore, even the most outwardly kind, good kid still at the core is self-centered. And so therefore, sometimes, and I think Paul Tripp really does a good job, there's a lot of self-deception, things that they don't see, and sometimes we as parents, we don't see either because we have a blinded eye to how our kids are. So that's where it really does help to step back and say, hey, can you evaluate my children? Like if you have someone, a friend or someone like that, or you see you have your kids play with other kids, it would be really good to say, what do you think about my children? What do you hear about them? What are some things that are blessings, and what are some of the challenges that they have? Do you experience that?
Have you tried that before?
Yeah, it's good. You have to be willing to hear it. I had someone come up to me and say, and this is about Carissa, my oldest, tell me some things that I think for a parent, as a pastor, I'm not surprised by many things because I've just heard some really bad things in my life. But as a parent, I think I get more surprised by things. So I try to not be outwardly surprised. And so when someone did, come up to me and tell me some things and shared some things. This is early on when Chris was in 8th grade, 9th grade, just entering into high school, and you just sort of go, what was all that parenting for in those early years? But I wouldn't have known it unless someone told me. Both Sue and I didn't know. Because sometimes friends know a lot more than parents. As we all know, right? We were all there. Sometimes you won't tell your parents certain things, especially when you're teenagers. And I do think that you should not be so gullible as to think that your children, no matter how good they are, that they don't have a secret heart that you don't really know about. And sometimes friends know a lot more about that secret heart than a parent does. Right? I think the funny thing is, we were all teenagers once. And you're hearing this, and you're probably thinking, no, that was me. But then when you're a parent, suddenly you get these glazed eyes, it's like this barrier comes up. Oh, no, not my child. They're so great. They never do anything. They don't sin. They're sinless. I know none of us think that way. We don't think it in the we think that in the we don't believe it in the abstract that they're sinless. But on the ground, generally, I think my children are really awesome. And when I hear something that totally goes against that, I think, no, you're totally wrong. Not my child. They're not like that. But I tell you that is a dangerous place to be in, is to think that your children cannot do that which you could not imagine them doing. So, what do you think about that? Gloria, what do you think?
About asking others?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's definitely good. It's hard.
Have you ever had anyone say anything about your kids?
Yeah.
How was it?
I appreciated it. Yeah, it was a close friend. I appreciated it, and I talked to my daughter after that.
Mm-hmm. But it was hard.
Well, not so much. I think it was just because it was just so blatant, like she was doing something wrong and disobeying. So, it's kind of like, well, I'm glad you told me, and I said thanks for telling me, and I went and disciplined. I think with bigger things, and I think as I get older too, it gets a little harder because it's more sensitive.
Yeah.
But it also depends on who's speaking to you and if you're coming out of love.
Yes. No, it's huge. Yeah.
I have a question. I think there's this mentality that we're different from our parents, right? I mean, and so I'm wondering if that becomes a delusion after a while, because you want to think that I would do it different than how my mom and dad did it. I feel like right now having those conversations with her, and it's very open and free flowing. But I'm just wondering, does that start breaking down? I mean, from some of the parents that have older children, have you seen that process? I mean, where at least in open conversations and open kind of relationships with your children, and then have you seen it kind of close up and over the years?
I'll let you guys answer it. That would be a good answer. How about anyone want to chime in? You could all chime in.
So you're saying it was open communication and it gets closed at a certain point?
Or does it?
Even now, my 6-year-old, there are certain things that he doesn't want to tell me. And I feel like you should not hide anything. You should tell me. You should be able to tell me, anything. So I tell him you could tell me anything. But I mean, one time I kind of forced him out of it, and it was a dream, and he thought it was reality. That I don't know, yelled at him or whatever it was. But but there are actually several cases where he I would be ask him why are you crying? He would say I don't know, or maybe he really doesn't know. Yeah. And then there are times that I think he doesn't want to tell me, and I'm like, he's only 6. I'm like, kind of like, if he's.
I don't think that that could be a phase. I don't think that means they're closing off. A lot of times there'll be various different reasons why they aren't going to tell you then, but then once they had time to process it or they feel safer time to do it, they might later. Just because they didn't want to tell you something right then doesn't mean that that's going to be a continuous pattern. But you know what? So you go through those times, like they don't want to tell you something, and then later they do. But my experience has been that you keep doing what you were doing, like keeping this open communication, and I found it not close at all. As a matter of fact, it opens wider as their experiences are more, they experience more, and you just keep remembering that you need to have that channel open where you don't want them to feel like they're not safe with you to talk about certain things, right? So I think I would say it's the opposite. There's just more talking going on, right? And so, But you gotta not, as you get older, when kids are young, they do something and you go, oh, that's great, or that has to die down. I noticed has to die down, especially with boys, or maybe other boys are different. With my boys, I had to just be very steady, no matter how bad it was or how good it is, right? So they know that, oh, I can tell mom and she can handle the truth. She can handle this. You wanna, even if you're whatever's going on inside, on the outside, you have to be calm, cool, and collected. Like, oh, that's, I can handle that. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
And then you can have your moment or whatever in the other room, but you can have
you can punch you have a little closet area where there are holes in it.
Yeah. Or whatever, but you come back, okay, so, you gotta, so you kind of create this environment where they have a safe place to fall all the time, or they can just come and tell you the worst thing, or and there were times when my heart was beating really fast, because I was like, okay, how am I gonna, answer this or whatever, but you just gotta be a really good actor, really, really good at acting, like, you can take care of it. And then I've noticed that they're like, okay, I can tell mom this, I can talk to her about this, and I'm not gonna get in trouble. She's not gonna get mad. She's not gonna have a fit. She's not gonna have a cow. I can just so then you do that, right? So I think then it just gets more. I've not experienced them really closely, but there are times I can see that they don't want to talk to me about something until they're ready. And I can see that, so then I just wait, and then look for opportunities to kind of bring it up, maybe. Not sometimes you can't just be direct. Sometimes you can be direct, sometimes you can't. But you find ways to, go in. It takes a lot more planning, thinking, and praying about it. Asking God to give me opportunities to bring it up, and sometimes they bring it up, and I bring it up. But if you leave it open, and they feel like they can easily come in through that door, I don't think it's necessarily have to be a closing thing as they get older.
Thank you. Anyone else? You could share. Maybe Anne and Tracy.
Agree with Ellen. I mean, I know if you yell like my parents, I don't want to hear about it, then of course you don't want to say anymore. But if you're like, okay, let's talk about this, then that communication is not closed off. So I agree with Ellen.
Tracy?
I'm not quite sure. So are you asking if the communication is not going to be there when the kids are older? Or?
Yeah, I feel like there's more things potentially that they're hiding from you. There's more chances for deception. I mean, there's more things that they're getting into, and there's more outside influences that, like friends or whoever that they can talk to about those things and not you.
Have you found that to be the case, that the girls share more with their friends than you, both of you?
I wouldn't say that. I think maybe my eyes are closed, but almost every night they come to our bed until 10:30, just hang out and talk. And they share some silly stuff too. I mean, we just talk in bed to the point where he would say, "Go to bed." So he usually keeps them up, but not too much. But I've noticed that there are times when the girls, especially Kayla, and she's almost 18, she tends to not disclose everything that goes through her head, and then we find out later. And we say, "Why didn't you tell us this?" She doesn't really necessarily have a reason why she didn't disclose, but yeah, I think that age is very confusing kind of even for her. So we're just trying to figure out how, sometimes a lot of things that she does doesn't really make sense even to her and us, of course. So we're all confused, and we talk things over, and some make sense later, some, just.
One of the things.
Yeah, Dan.
I don't think over time we've seen a closing up on either of our kids. I think they're different. Like our oldest is more talkative. She likes to share her day and the details of her life more openly. But as Tracy said, she doesn't always disclose everything. I think that was the case when she was younger, and we see that now as she's older. Whereas our younger one, we ask her how's school, it's okay. That's pretty much all she says. So in a sense, like a boy in terms of her communication, but she's very transparent. She doesn't hide anything. So I don't think being talkative is the same thing as being transparent. We really haven't seen a change. I think kind of they've been consistent through the different stages. At least they have.
How old are
11.
17 and 15. Oh, okay.
But I was going to say sometimes I've noticed they don't have to tell me. They don't tell me everything. They do deserve some privacy. They do deserve some. If we've been if we've been doing all these things, that I think keeping open communication and really get them founded in the Word of God. I think you have to give them opportunity to process things on their own and to struggle with it on their own and go to God with it before, and I think it's really important to let them go through that, for them to develop their own relationship and dig their own well and do all of that. But if there's a serious thing that they are feeling like they have to hide, that's what I don't want. But I think, you have to let them have their freedom to be who they are, and sometimes if they want to, oh, I don't have to tell mom that I'm having a problem with this, this math or whatever it is, because they probably don't think it's a big deal. But if they think it's a big deal, they need somebody to open. That's when you want them to come. But I don't want to know every little thought they have either.
It wouldn't be healthy for you or for them.
Yeah.
I will say this is that as the kids get older, and we talked about this earlier, is that when children are younger, they need a lot of boundaries, a lot, right? And so that's why provide these boundaries, and they are sort of given these limitations, and they know that there are consequences when they pass those boundaries. But the hope is that as they grow, you're slowly stripping away the boundaries, right? And that's in many ways a very fearful thing, or tempted to be fearful on our part as parents, I think, as well as on the children's parents. But one of the things he talked about is the fact that you cannot build a tall enough fence around your children to protect them. No matter how high or strong or wide you build that fence, they can still get through it. And because their heart is there, it's Eve's heart, And so that's why rehab centers, they work to a point. You know how it works in a rehab center? Like when a drug addict goes to rehab, you know what they do? You can guess, right?
Strong from all their whatever that's.
Yes. You're essentially placed into a rehab, but it's a prison, right? So they would take away everything and they limit your abilities to have access to anything. That's why it works, to a point. But the problem is they eventually get let go. And once they get let go, the real question is, has something inside changed that won't be affected by the external factors? And so I think for us as parents of teens and parents of children who are younger, we have this responsibility not to try to create a bunch of boundaries for them to live in so that they can sort of be totally protected by us, because that'll never happen. But actually what we need to do is, as he talked about, which is something that Thomas Chalmers talked about in the 1800s, the expulsive power of a new affection. You need to create a greater affection in their hearts for that which is that's greater than what Satan or their own flesh longs for, right? It's the only thing that can truly help a child or an adult really break free of the temptations of the things around them. So The answer is not going to be, you know how like with, if I'm in a, if I have a little child, a baby, and you childproof the house, right? You can do that for a baby. You can childproof the house, but you cannot childproof the world. That's impossible. Isn't that true? You cannot walk around your child's life till they're 50 years old, taking away every magazine, closing the computer down, covering their eyes in every movie. It just isn't going to happen. The only thing you can do, and this is what you have as an opportunity as a parent to do, is to fill their mind with something greater than anything that's out there and help them to see that. That's why, so I mean, going back to what you were talking about, your greatest tool is not discipline, your greatest tool is teaching. What's going to, the discipline protects your children for the moment because of a consequence, and it's important. It's a tool. And think of all this as a toolkit, right? But really, your most powerful tool is teaching, because that's what's really going to be the dramatic influencer over your children. No one has the ability to do what you have to do, because right now in this season of your life, especially when the kids are young, they look up to you. And you are their hero, their king, their queen. You know, you're everything to them, their leader, and you have their full undivided attention. Well, should be that way. I know it's not always that way, but you have that opportunity. And if you are constantly sticking the phone in front of them when you don't feel like talking to them, hey, watch this, so you can do whatever you want to do. Well, basically, you've yielded. I'm not saying there's no place for videos and stuff. I do it too. I'm not saying that. But if I know parents who literally, that is what they're doing all the time with their kids. They had any opportunity of dead time, they stick their phone in front of the kids. So really, think about it this way. What is the influencer over that child the most? What's influencing that child's brain and heart the most? Whatever they're watching. And if they're playing video games, and this is the challenge, I mean, I'm always weighing this especially with my kids, because they love video games and movies too, and media. They do. And we're always weighing, okay, we don't want to be protectionistic and in some sense legalistic, but at the same time recognizing that I don't want to put a video in front of my kids every single moment they have free time. So your greatest power as a parent is to teach them. And know that when you teach them and you fill their brain with the Lord, with the things of what you love, what you're passionate about, eventually, when they get older and they're teenagers, guess what fills their mind? It's that stuff. But if their mind is filled with, watching this and that and playing video games and doing all this, by the time they're a teenager, it'll be very difficult to pull those video games away from them. And the media. You think it's hard to pull it away now? It'll be 10 times, 100 times worse as a teenager. Was that not true, parents?
That's very true. I thought Barney was very harmless, but it just leads to something else.
It's like it really is. It's next and next and next and next, and it just doesn't stop. Yeah.
Gina has a question.
Yeah.
Gina Choi. She says, for boys, is it more important that they're closer or have a deeper relationship with their dads than moms, or does it matter? Should the relationship change as they get older because she feels like they like her more now?
That's a good question. You mean Mama's Boy? Anyone here Mama's Boy? I was. Am I the only one? I admit it.
You know you were.
None of you guys were? No? Really? I guess I was the only one. Yeah.
My brother.
Really? Would he agree if he was here?
I guess you were the favorite.
I wasn't the favorite.
Were you here for that? I'm sorry. That's another question we're talking
Oh, really?
about.
I really, really believe this is that for boys, these are all generalities, okay? Everything I'm about to say is all generalities. It's not, I mean, definitely there's exceptions, there's different cases and all that. But I would say, and you guys can help me on this, I really think that for boys, we will always, to some extent, have a natural affinity towards moms, whether we agree it or not. Simply because there is something to the maternal instinct, and I think all kids in general have a natural connection to mom. It could be just simply time. I mean, it could be as practical as that. Kids just spend more, a lot. Generally speaking, these are all generalities. Kids generally spend more time with moms than dads. So because of that, the father, I think, does play a key role, and especially for a boy, and especially in our society where gender roles are absolutely in confusion and in chaos today, more than ever before. And so it is very difficult for a boy today to understand what it means to be a man. And if the father, just like a father has a key role for a daughter, and really, so fathers, I would say that we have a very important role for daughters, which is that if you are not engaging your daughter, we'll talk about this in the sexuality side, and if you're not engaging them by showing them affection, I tell my daughters, I just said it this past Sunday, I said, you all look pretty, you all look beautiful. It's hard for me to say that. I'm not, you know me, I'm not a huggy, I'm not a mushy, sentimental person. Ellen, when you say you might have to go into the room to like, after I say that, I have to go into a room somewhere and just be like, yeah, get the wife, take a shower or something. But yeah, I'm just not naturally a person who goes around, especially in a sentimental way. But I also know that if my children, I don't do that, and I really did think that too. It's not fake, but it takes a lot for me to do that. But I also know that if I don't do that for my daughters, they will look for other men. They will search other men who want that from them, they want that from another man. And so I have an opportunity in this season to prepare them eventually for their husband, who will take over my responsibility and my job. You might say, I want to work myself out of a job in that way. And the way that I do that is to really show affection to my daughters, to tell them I love them, give them hugs and kisses, and I really do have to work hard on that. So yeah, I know. The Lord knows. Now for a son, I think if I am not showing him regularly what it means to be a man, he's going to also learn that from somewhere else. And the challenge for him is that he might not learn that at all in today's culture, and especially in our regional culture, that he might learn more of what it means to be a woman than a man. And if I don't show that to him, he won't understand it at all. So I have the responsibility of showing a certain type of love and affection to my daughters so that they will understand what it means to be a woman and what it means to be loved by a man. And I have a responsibility as a father to show my son what it means to be responsible and a protector and a provider and someone who's going to lead and shepherd a family and a wife and sometimes be stronger than he needs to be. I have to teach that. I take that as my responsibility. It's not the church's responsibility, it's mine. And so if fathers are not engaged in that, then the mother is really, really, sort of working with one hand tied behind their back, and it's a really big hand. And it's sad. I know some of you may be going through that, and some out there who, it's not that their husbands are terrible, but frankly, a lot of them have abdicated their responsibilities as a father. And I don't think it's impossible for those kids to grow up still in a godly, gracious, loving way where a boy turns into a godly man, or a girl turns into a godly woman. I don't think it's impossible with only a single mom, because God gives greater grace in those instances. But I do think if you are in that scenario where you're doing it alone and you feel really like this is a challenge because my husband is a no-time father and husband, you really need support. I mean, I think that's a huge part. And I think what you need to do then is find other men in the church, hopefully, who you can connect your sons with or your daughters with to say, well, in this instance, more sons. Daughters, I don't think you should do that with other men. But sons, though, and the sad part is that even with that context, it's been abused in this culture of ours. And that's the reality of sin. So there's always, you have to be wise, you have to be discerning. This is the sad, sinful, depraved part of our culture. It's not supposed to be this way. But if you are a single mom, or if you're, have a abdicated husband and father, find godly men who will be willing to invest in your son's life. Yeah. Ladies, what do you think about that? What I just said about husbands, and then husbands, what do you think about that? And then
I'm kind of wondering about that. I feel like a lot of husbands have this burden of providing for the family, and that is their main stress. And I wonder if that's it. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
you mean for them, that's what they think?
Yeah.
A lot do.
Yeah.
Many think that way.
For just providing for the family,
yes.
and it's like live and die by that, and I kind of, I know it's important to raise our sons to, believe that they should be the provider and all that. But part of me wonders kind of what else? Where else? That can't be their only purpose.
No, it isn't.
And I feel like most men are brought up to feel that that is sometimes their only purpose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a wrong view of marriage itself, ultimately, and fathering. And the cycle needs to be broken. Any of you have a really godly father who led you to be the man you are today? And I don't mean it in a negative way. Any of you?
Yeah, my father felt like a godly man, now they, no. So
did he teach you and guide you and direct you as to what it means to be a father, what it means to be a husband, how to be a godly man, all those things, Eric? Or is it he just provided?
But I think he tried to.
Okay. 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 That's great.
I'm still lacking.
No, that's great. I didn't grow up with that. My father was I really do believe he loves the Lord, but serious challenges. And anything I know of the Lord is not from my father at all. And it is God's grace that somewhere along the way, and I do believe, what happened? My mom. She was a significant part. And you know what? She prayed every day, and she prays today 3 times a day. And she'll ask me, so can you tell me a prayer request? And I told her about church building. I said, who knows what's going to happen? She said, I'm praying for it. I've been praying for that for the past 10 years. That's what she said to me. So honestly, there's something I said this last time, about praying mothers. It's huge. It can overcome a lot. Because the Lord, it's about the Lord. Yeah. But it's not supposed to be that way, though. That's not, great. As long as you have a praying mother, forget about your dad. It doesn't matter. Father, you can do whatever you want. Just have your wives pray a lot. That's not the answer. The answer is that the father should be really engaged as a husband, first and foremost, because you cannot be a good father without being a good husband. It starts with your marriage. And that even is not the beginning point. It starts with the Lord. Then your marriage. Then your fathering. So I think we have to remember that. Yeah. No, I agree with you, Julia. It's not supposed to be that way. And we're going to continue because there are just a few more things I want to cover that he talked about. Companions. Talk about an area that's pretty important for teenagers is friends, right? And the Proverbs does talk a lot about the wisdom of who you choose as your friends. And one of the things that Paul Tripp talked about was the fact that the teenagers are going to acquire friends that they don't know. And something that you both said is that that for Kayla, that she's going through her challenges at 18, 17. But I realized that definitely that's an area where it's unique and person to person. because some can go through at 13, 15, 17, 20, 25. So that's another thing, is that we have to think of the long view, and it's that my kids can be a certain way all the way up to a certain point, but suddenly there's change. It really does happen. You'd be surprised how many times that happens actually because there are certain things, like for example, first of all, our kids have grown up in the church. You know, they've grown up in the church and under your home. Once they hit college, now ultimately they're going to decide whether they go to church or not. They're going to decide where they go to church. They're going to decide who their friends are. They're going to decide how much time they spend with their friends. They're going to decide whether they're male friends or female friends. And you all know what it's like. We all were there, and you're away from your family. So really anything goes. And the hope is that all of this stuff that you started from 0 all the way through to 18 years old, now that they're ready to go out, all of that has now shaped their heart so that when they make decisions, that's always there. But somewhere along the way, they need to have wrestled with at least some point of, do I really believe this stuff? Is it my parents' stuff or is it my stuff? And when they get to that point, the hope is that they're wrestling with it while they're under your home. That's the best place to wrestle with it, but it might not happen that way. Just because of the makeup of that particular child, the influences that are around them, they might not have, like for example, if you homeschool, for Ellen and I, we do homeschool, and our kids are, like we told Carissa, this is the first time you're going to be in a school environment where everyone's not a believer. And so I said, and this is college, right? So I said, okay, so what I want you to do is, you're going to hear a lot of language, and I had to go through a whole thing of, do you understand how to process this? Think about this. What if someone does something that is rude to you or even wrong? What do you do about that? I mean, that's just going to happen more and more as time goes by, don't you think? So you want them to actually struggle with things while they're under the protection of your home, but they might not. And they might have to process it then. What do you do then? What do you think? So your friends, do you, especially for those who have teens, do you all have kids who's all their friends? Dan, do you know all your kids' friends?
Yeah, she has only like 3 friends.
both of them?
No, Kiva just, I think, said last year she's been more open to making friends, I would say. Yeah. But I have met them several times. We invited them over. So, but with Ellie, she doesn't want to make friends that much. She has maybe 2 friends.
Yeah.
And she considers church friends as more close friends. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is true. So like at school, I don't think Ellie considers anyone, her acquaintances, as real friends. She confides it. But I sense that for our older one, her closer friends are school friends, none of whom are believers. So that's a choice that she's made.
But she doesn't. Yeah, but she doesn't really share too much.
Yeah.
Like she shares with church friends, like the things that she. So it is, I would say, more shallow because she knows that they're not believers.
Yeah. But it will change though when she goes to college.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Where she will develop stronger relationships, with people you really won't know, right? And that's always, I think, for a parent that. I think generally, and here's the thing is, with our church, we're for Access for the Youth. There's probably about 25 kids. It wasn't that long ago. There was about 5 kids. So and when you all are, if you're all around, I mean, the youth group could be 100 kids. So definitely, it's going to be a different picture than what we have experienced, because we're sort of on the forefront, and they've sort of had to have gotten to know each other in this teen years, but I think it's going to be very different. And so you're going to have different kids facing different things, and there could be even more cliques. There already are little here and there, but it could be much more than ever before when your kids are in the youth. That's in a church context. And so when you have that, I think you start breaking off into friendships, and as well as their school. And so definitely some kids, and our kids generally are good kids overall. All the kids in our church are generally good kids. I don't think that'll always be like that. I really don't. I think one day you're going to have a lot of different types of children, youth, and they're not always going to be exactly. And my not greatest concern, but I have a concern that our church will not be open to having a youth that is a difficult one. What I mean by difficult is not a bad personality, but what if someone's a bit more rough around the edges? You know, or would I be so scared for my child that kid is coming on Sunday? I mean, to youth group. Don't you think that's? I don't know. For me, that's something that I think about. Can we be a place that? I think the adults can, but I don't know if the kids can. The adults who are leading can be towards that one student, but I wonder if the parents would be okay. Like, let's say there was a rough around the edges type of kid, a little bit more, for lack of a better word, gangsterish, you know, but really came because they're interested in this God stuff, you know, and so they're a friend of, you know, Jim over there. And so they come, and suddenly, and let's say some of the girls started, you know, ooh, you know, strange, foreign, evil man, get attracted to him type of thing. Yeah. And it's your daughter. What happens then? This is what the church is supposed to be like. But see, we all like the abstract of, oh yeah, that's the church. You know, we get to reach someone who's really just someone needs the Lord, but really rough around the edges. As long as he doesn't date my daughter, or my daughter's not attracted to, or he's not attracted to my daughter. I wonder if we, as we're raising our children, if we understand all of these implications. So when we're thinking about our kids, we have to be thinking, how am I living and helping my children understand not just how to be a good girl or boy, but how to process life and all of its intricacies and challenges and difficulties in view of what God wants, not what we as parents want. And protectionism is such a big part of us, right? Fear and protection, especially regarding friends. I mean, what did you think about his idea about building the, you know, the half pipe in his backyard?
I have a question. So, if you are the parent to a child and you recognize there is a possible friend that is a bad influence,
yes,
how would you react?
What do you all think? I'm going to throw that one out there.
I would invite them. In fact, I didn't do the half pipe ramp. I had the senior class, Noah's senior class, come over to do senior bench project. That means like they were building this Harry Potter style wood structure. I had paint on that concrete. I had to let go of control and say, this is a rental home, you know, I can't mess it up too big, but you know, but it was one way for me to know who Noah talked to during that year. I didn't get to know them too well. I mean, I brought up some refreshments, and they were very polite, and they did their best to clean up. But I had to let go of control and say, you know, you gotta be careful of the neighbor's fence. You can't drip any more paint or leave stuff behind. But you know, just do what I can and just try to be. I just try to be a gracious host.
Sorry, as far as like, you know,
if you know they're really bad influence.
Well, I mean, like, that's all relative. But like, you know, like Arden will come home and tell me like, oh yeah, that's a really bad boy. How do you respond? Because it's like, you obviously don't want them to imitate that behavior, but at the same time, you don't want them to be legalistic.
Yeah.
So how?
Yeah.
That's part of the shaping their thought process of how they judge people, right?
Yes. Yeah. I know the right answer. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, whether I actively put that into practice, I'm just thinking it through, because there are a lot of kids little kids, let's say, that I think, oh, what a pain in me. I don't. And I know that is just not what the Lord sees. So I think a lot of questions, like if Arden were there, I would say, why is he bad? What are some of the reasons? Do you think we can try to, be kind to him regardless of whether he's mean or not, and see what happens there? Those are things that I think I would want to do. On the other hand, I'd be like, hey, let me teach you how to box. That's why there's another side of me that feels that way. And so I don't think that it means you should go, if there's a bully, you should go up to him and get punched all the time. Use your face as a punching bag for him. I mean, I don't think that's the answer of what the Lord even wants of us. But at the same time, I think there is a place to recognize that sometimes I do think we should be really, really careful with who our kids hang out with. I don't think there's anything wrong with being very interventionist when it comes to friendships, because Proverbs is so clear about, I mean, just type in friends and fools in Proverbs, and you'll find many verses on the subject. So you really need to be wise. I think what Anne described is sort of the first gateway. You need to be in a place where you're willing to have the friends over no matter who they are, and be as open-hearted and minded as you can about them. So get a sense of what they're like. And generally I think most of you are pretty discerning, so you'll get an idea. Now, if this is a person who you feel like, they genuinely like my son or daughter, maybe they're not the best influence, but I have an opportunity here because maybe they have a father who ran away from home when they were 2 years old, or a mother, and whatever it might be. So maybe it is an opportunity in ministry. So I think there is a place to really assess and weigh what it's like. But if you get a sense of this person's really impacting my child, I do think there's a place to say, I'm sorry, but you're not going to be able to spend time with this child or this teenager, whatever it might be, because it doesn't take much to actually ruin a person's life. And so I think there's some wisdom to that. But I would do investigation first before I made that cutoff. Right? I mean, does that seem reasonable? So, and think of opportunities for ministry. Because you really could make a difference in that child and that teenager. Maybe Arden, if he's 15 years old, loves the Lord, and he's spending time with this real gangsterish kid at school. For some reason, he's drawn to Arden. That Arden, you really believe, is strong enough to actually make an influence in him rather than the other way around. And that's something that you both are going to need to know about your son, know the situation, be actively engaged and involved in that scenario. So you can't just let that go and be like, oh Lord, please protect my child, give him wisdom, and that's it. You should be, as soon as he's coming home, ask questions. Where were you? What's going on? Get an idea of where he's been. And if he's really loving you and loving the Lord, he'll voluntarily give up that information. It's not like he's upset by you asking. So again, that's a lot of hopefully you've done the work early on that he'll be in a place. I pray that would be our kids, but honestly, it's rare. It's rare. It's not rare. It's not impossible. I'm sorry. It's not rare. I pray that it would happen to many more youth in our church, that they would be a salt and light wherever they are.
I pray it would happen. Actually, I have several examples. Like, my younger son, he plays golf. So he's on the golf course with lots of teenagers and even adults. And it's not the most best place to, send. So I'm there with them. I used to be there all the time now. But anyway, so all his friends are golf friends, right? So and they have this bad attitude, and it's a frustrating game, so we understand why
Very
they
competitive,
the way
right?
they do. Competitive language. It's just not. It's not. I wouldn't. If I had my choice, I wouldn't have him out there, right? But because this was going on, I needed to have a talk with him about how to process this, what happens, and what. So anyway, but he has friends that I consider not a good influence, just because how they are behaving or the way they speak, their language. And so my son will come and tell me, this friend that wants to play with me, play golf, whatever, is this way. And then and we take it as, okay, here is an opportunity for ministry, for you to be a salt and light, right? So what we do is, first thing we do is we start praying for this friend. And because I want my son to experience, you pray for somebody and see what God does in that person's life, right? So we do that, and we've had like examples. You can ask my son where this boy that or these kids are just drawn to Isaiah, and God's giving him opportunity. That's what that's what's happening. It's not because of, so he has opportunity to talk to them, and then when you're on the golf course, you're spending a lot of time with them, and they'll ask questions like, how come, like the question that he gets asked a lot is, how come you don't cuss? He's very well known for not cussing golf. That's like a rare thing. Is it because you're homeschooled? The first thing they say is because you're homeschooled and you're not allowed to. And then so he gets that, and then when he asks me that, how do I answer that? And we go through what to say, right? You can say it this way, or you can do this, and we really just take that opportunity of him being on the golf course to minister, right? Teach him and what you do if everybody's being this way, you can be this way, to stand out so that you can be an example, right? So I think, and so we've actually seen, he has a friend whose dad, their parents are divorced. Their mom goes to church, but dad doesn't, and he was having a really tough time, and he was playing bad golf, and his dad was mad at him, and all this stuff. He really tough relationship with the dad, and Isaiah hooked up with him, and in the beginning, I had to really say, okay, you have to limit spending time with him. If you see him, you can only spend this much time, because there was just. But more and more, every time he would see Isaiah, he would just come right over to Isaiah, And so we started praying for him and talking to him, and this boy opened up the struggles he had with his dad. And it was an opportunity for Isaiah to share about what he can do, he can say, and the relationship got better. He wanted to go to youth group in his church. So his mom later came and thanked me. Your son is doing this and this and this. And so those are opportunities, right? Where are they going to have that kind of, right? Even at school. So I would really, if your son is seeing or having a relationship with a friend that is not so, I always just start praying for that child and praying for that relationship where your son or daughter can be, yourself in that person's life. What an opportunity.
Yeah.
So their example is, it's not impossible.
No, it is not impossible. Just,
I think my natural inclination, if my kids are hanging out with people that maybe misbehaving or not up to Christian standards, my inclination is to cut them off. But as talking about this, it reminded me of when I was in 8th grade, I was that bad boy. I remember going to an arcade with a group of friends, and we put a tape with a string on a quarter. And our intention was to,
yes,
credit without losing that quarter. We got caught, and we got kicked out. One of my friends had to call his mom who picked us up. And then later he told me that my mom said that I shouldn't be hanging out with you anymore. So I was that naughty boy. So I'm not saying I was guilt-free, but I should be more empathetic, being the recipient of that quick judgment. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but in light of what Ellen said, in light of my own experience, I think there needs to be that grace. I don't think it's a clear-cut rule.
Yeah.
really does require some discernment.
Lily has a question. She says, can you go back and address the father's role in teaching son about masculinity? Because her and Scott are arguing about uber masculinity versus godly gentlemanless. Nelly. Uber masculinity
Yes.
versus godly
Okay. So this is one that maybe I think it will be good for our forum here of men and women.
Well, we think you should have a follow-up class for men.
Night watchman.
You know, on this topic.
So here's the thing is I would say, and this is, like I said, this is a good forum for it because I do think that Sue and I have had our run-ins on this topic as well, primarily because of what I do believe are generally ideas of what it means to be, especially for a boy, to be eventually a man, and how you get there, and what you need to do for that, to that end. And I really believe that God brought the husband and wife together to bring two elements, two sides that in some sense come together to actually create something beautiful within a boy to be a man or a girl to be a woman. And so both husband and wife need to know that both perspectives are actually important in shaping them. That it's not about, oh, the woman is always right or wrong, or the man is always right or wrong. It's that both are essential to actually shaping rightly. And we, as individualistic, independent people, we generally have a hard time hearing the other side because we think they really don't get us. Right? That's generally the assumption, is that you're not a man, or you're not a woman, you don't understand, you're not a mother, you're not a father. So I do think that there probably needs to, I don't think it's a either or. I think it's going to be a chiseling out of this marble, you might say, into this awesome statue of a man called your son. And God is using both of you to shape that. But the challenge is going to be is in the midst of that, recognizing that battle, to me that just seems normative. I don't think it's something that you're going to easily settle with one shot. And for me to say, okay, here's what you need to do, this, and everything will be okay. And this is exactly how you should do it. Rather, I think what you need to do is to say, what does Scripture talk about what it means to be a man? And how does a mother help shape that uniquely as a mother? And how does a father shape that uniquely as a father? That might be a whole nother topic. We might be sitting here for another hour talking about that one. So, but I think that for men, we generally want our sons to be strong. And I don't mean physically, although that might be part of it, but it definitely means emotionally strong. I think it means someone who's not going to back down. And that's why fathers are like, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. You know, get up, you're okay. And the mother's like, oh, let me wipe that for you, boo-boo. And, give the kiss on the knee. And we're like, leave him alone. He's okay. You're just babying him. You get into that conflict and you think, okay, who's right in that scenario, right? Who's really right? I think the father's afraid that this boy is going to grow up being incredibly weak. And the mother's afraid that this boy is going to grow up feeling incredibly abandoned by their parents. These are extremes, but they're intended to give an illustration. And there's probably an element of truth to both, but not the extremes of both. And the problem is that in the middle of it all, especially in the middle of conflict, we always go to the extremes. We have a hard time seeing how both have elements of truth that we need to bring together to shape this person. So I think for us, the answer is not, all right, here's what you need to do, A, B, C, D, E, but the answer is going to be, let's really process what it means to be a man, and how does a father do that uniquely to a boy, and sometimes I think of it this way: if Jack, let's say, did not have me in his life, what would he end up being like? And then if Sua was not in his life, what would he end up being like? And I can sort of picture what it would be like. And I don't think that's what I would want for my son. It might happen, but I don't think that's what I would want. So that's not I didn't give a clear answer because, frankly, I don't think I could do that in you know, I could give you, okay, here's what you need to consider, this. But I think they shouldn't fight about it. I think rather you should, Scott and Ellie, I think you should really work through together and really pray together about this and say, how can we, like, it's not about being an ultra Uberman, not Superman, but Uberman. But is Nellie's definition of what Scott's trying to do an Uberman? You know, and then is Scott's definition of what Nellie's trying to do, and I'm sorry, Scott and Nellie, I'm using both of you, but that you're trying to, oh, Nellie, you're creating a pansy, you know? You know, so again, I think it's projection, all those things. But we'll talk about it.
Next.
Yeah, next. Yes. Let me just lastly talk about this one area because it's such an important one, sexuality. It's one that I think, let me ask you all, I know I'm going to start asking the tough questions. Have all of you had a conversation, those teen mom dads, have you had a conversation with your kids about sex?
I have.
You have?
I have even talked with Nicole.
Oh,
but I realize it's not just the one day talk.
It's not.
Yeah.
You know, I like, he always describes it this way, the weird sex talk. You know? Like the awkward, weird sex talk.
I told her I'd rather have her hear from me first than have her hear from school, because she's gonna learn either fourth grade or
Health
fifth
class.
grade. Health class, yeah. And they're pushing the boundaries there.
They are. Yeah. What about both of you?
Did you guys do it, or what did the school do it for you? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And Ellen?
Yeah.
Did Gabriel do it?
No. So we're thinking, I think every child is different. We've done the like the not uncomfortable stuff. But actually now I'm reading a book. It took me a long time to look for a resource to use for my boys because we have been so open, but because the way I want to do it may not, be best for them. So right now I'm in the process of reading this book about, it's actually called, I think, Sex, Relationship, and Marriage in the Biblical way for teens. So I'm reading it, and there's some things that I don't like how the author is posing it, but I'm actually going to read it, and I think I'm going to probably do that. I meant to do it before he started school in the fall. I don't know why I said that because he was going to go to law school. I don't know why. I don't know why that sounds so stupid. But I did it. That sounds so stupid, right? But anyway, for some reason I just thought, okay, then and then it didn't work out that way. So I'm working through this book right now, and I know they're not gonna like it.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm sorry, Ellen, did you say you have or you're going to have?
I have not, so I'm going to.
Yeah. Wow.
How old are they?
15 and 13.
Oh,
okay. But see, my 15-year-old is like 13, and my 13 is like 14 and a half. Right? So there, I was sort of waiting for them to get into it, because you know what? If I told my older one, he's not. I waited for him to be mature enough to be able to take it and just say, I'm not going to, say something inappropriate to my little brother who may not understand, right? So, so I wanted them to be, in a similar place where I could do this together, but I haven't decided if I will or not.
So, thank you for sharing all that. No, really. And
pick up me.
I think on this topic, it's, as I shared last week on Sunday, and then some stuff that he talked about, and then just my own counseling situations, as well as like in counseling other people, reading stuff. It's really bad, and our culture is inundated with sex, and I think it's inescapable. As long as you have an internet connection, you pretty much have it everywhere. So our teenagers and your kids, and just to let you know, so many kids get addicted to porn at, as early as age like 6, 7. Be surprised how many men who are addicted to pornography today. No, I'm serious. Who are
not 15 and 13?
No, who have like, remember I shared an illustration. I shared it briefly, but if I gave it to you in depth, it's like shocking, because that 16-year-old pedophile, the reason why is he accidentally looked at his computer, and there were of his parents, and I think his dad was looking at pedophilic imagery, and he just started scrolling through it, and eventually it became emblazoned in his mind, and it changes you. It affects the way he started being attracted to little kids. He's at 16 years old. We're not talking about a 50-year-old man or a 40-year-old man, which is disgusting in of itself. But it's happening more and more. And in talking with people who have been addicted to pornography, and if you ask them what was your first pornographic experience, it's usually around 4 years old on average. And the reason is because someone had a magazine. And this is when we were kids, right? These days it's a lot easier, but back then it was magazine. I mean, I don't know. I won't ask here, when did you first see a pornographic image, but I mean, most of us have probably seen it when we were kids. And the sad part is those images are hard to erase in your brain, no matter how hard, no matter what you have. I really believe the only way is the explosive power of a new affection. You have to have something greater, or else you'll be stuck with that. Our kids are inundated with that, and more so than ever before. I was listening to an NPR interview, and they were interviewing the guy from VR, like virtual reality, Oculus VR, who is Facebook bought out, and he was talking about, just what all the implications of virtual reality. I mean, it's pretty amazing, and I think what you're going to find is that people are going to be addicted to virtual reality, because they did a test where they put on the headgear, and with that they were able to have it where a trap door opened right in front, and everyone stood and just were deathly afraid to move. But that trap door was not there. It's totally virtual reality. But they say in a year it's going to come out full blown, and you're going to see it much more. And one of the uses of it, they said, the ability to be able to have virtual sex is going to be very real, so that you can have essentially an absolutely sexually fulfilling experience that you couldn't have in marriage or anything like that, because with marriage comes all these problems, and sex doesn't always happen perfectly in the way you want it to be. But with virtual reality you can have that. So this is a year away for us, where it's probably not going to be fully, it'll take a little time. But when our kids are our age, this is going to be really rock solid. And so it's just more and more and more and more. This is not going away. So here's the thing. You have an option. You can either get in front of it all, or you're going to be always reacting. And the way you're reacting is, do not be embarrassed. I mean, that's the first thing. I know, so Ellen, the way you're talking, I feel that same way. I shared. I don't want to tell. I have a hard enough time telling my kids they're beautiful. So we'll forget about talking about the intricacies of sex and all the parts of it. But I know that if I let my embarrassment get in the way of these conversations, it will be to the detriment of my children, and really they're going to face that. They will face it in college.
Well, maybe our kids won't have virtual reality, but public in Fremont School District, they were pushing for 9th grade health sex education beyond talking about using condoms and safe sex and all that. There was a textbook that was approved that talked about bondage, sex toys, and and then there was some full-blown diagram that parents could preview this textbook, which the board members have approved on, which a lot of parents try to say remove it. But our public schools are saying, in order for our kids to understand all of this, we need to show them all of these things. Because, 50 Shades of Grey's out and all this other stuff. So that's what probably talk to her about it.
Well, so that's the point, is that either you're going to be proactive or reactive, because it's going to happen. So the question is, and there's a series out there. We've used it with our kids. It's by Concordia Press. It actually has different stages of from even the earliest of stages to talk about sex from a Christian worldview. And it starts, I don't remember what the earliest. I think it's like, I need to start having that conversation with Jack. I haven't yet, and I need to. And because the way that we've done it is, if they're girls, it's Sua's gonna have that talk. And I'm always like, yes. 3 times. But if it's boys, it's me. And I'm thinking, oh man, that's going to be a challenge. That might be one of my greatest parenting challenges yet. But I need to do it. I need to. So this class is a great reminder for me to get on this.
So do you think for boys it's better for fathers to talk to them?
I really do believe that.
Really?
I do. And here's the reason why, is that, first of all, is it better? Yes. Is it absolutely required? No. I mean, I'd rather have the mom say it than no one say it. So that's the first thing. But I do think it makes sense that a father talks about it. First of all, we all know why. We have commonality, right? It makes sense. And there are experiences physically that we have gone through that my son's going to go through. Sua did not go through certain experiences that I went through. Certain changes that happen uniquely to me will happen to him. Just like for a woman, there are things that women go through that guys still, we have some idea, but we still really don't know. Wow, what is going on here? Right? I mean, so I think there's a point. It makes sense that a mom would have this conversation with her daughter, right? I think it makes sense for a man to have it with his son. I think if a man who is a God-fearing man does not want to have that conversation with his son, I would ask the question: is it because he's cowardly? Strong word, but I really want to say that is it cowardice? Like, are you absolutely advocating your role? Because that boy is going to face so much hardship as a boy growing up to be a man in a sex-crazed world. And if you as a father are unwilling to have that conversation with your son, why? Because you feel embarrassed? I mean, that doesn't make sense. Because you're tired? So to me, the reasons as to why you wouldn't have that conversation is absolutely ludicrous. There's no reason why. Just be honest and say, I'm a sinner, I'm a wretch, I'm weak. Just say I'm a coward. I think that's what we need to be really honest with ourselves. And yeah, there's a part of me that's really afraid of that conversation myself with my son. But if I don't do it, I'm a coward, and I fully admit it. It's because I'm afraid, and that's it. Forget all the excuses. Oh, I'm tired of, my wife will do a better job. She's more articulate than I am. She knows much more than I do. She has more time. She has a better relationship with him anyway. That's all excuses. It's sheer cowardice if you don't do it. Can I say it any stronger than that?
But it would be okay for me to also talk to them.
It would be okay, absolutely. I just want the father to be a man.
Actually, for me, I want to talk to them first before, I actually don't want my husband to go first because he will just, with no thought or prayer or preparation, right? And I told him, wait until I lay the foundations. And
you know what, Ellen, maybe he might be selling him short. Even if he lays it out, I think it's okay. I think there's a fear that he's going to mess it up, but that fear is not. I don't know if that's a fear that you should have.
It's not unfounded because he's done stuff like that before, where he would do something I would have to.
You're like, hey, I object to that.
wouldn't object. And I think that's what he knows, and he understands this is important. So he said, how do you wanna do this? And I said, let me do this first, because they're used to me talking to them in a certain way, and then you can come and try to mess it up or whatever it is that you do. Or I said we do it together, but I would speak first, right?
Ellen, you know what I would say is this, is that you do not understand what a man goes through in that way. If you were a single mom, I'd be like, that's fine. Of course.
Yeah, that's part I wouldn't do. I would go through the, other stuff.
I don't know what the other stuff is. I just would say,
About,
without going into
what
detail.
a marriage is and how sex what it was intended for, and all that biblical stuff, and then he can go through whatever, whatever the guys gotta, talk about. That's fine.
What are you gonna say? Guys gotta do what a guy's gotta do. And
to answer your question, John did not do it perfectly. Okay, he actually read it out of the book that I remember Sam was advocating during one of the retreats.
Yeah.
So he it's not like something he could just talk about naturally, but he actually read it out.
Yeah, that would be
He just
good.
read it
I
out.
have
Yeah. So I had to let him do that part because I really don't want to talk to the boys about it, but
What am I talking about? I just gotta know, because the part about what a relationship is and what a marriage, and then what a woman would expect from for a husband, and that sort of thing. I want to do that, my part, and then
I totally think there is a mom and a dad can say a lot of things about sex, and they should, about marriage, about and that's not left to one gender. But I do think that there is something to allowing, and again, it's not a hard, fast rule or anything like that. I don't want to make a law. I just think that there's wisdom into saying that for a man to be able to say certain things to a son. That I don't think Sua would have that same type of wisdom that I could say to Jack as I would regarding this area. That seems to make common sense, right? That's not so absurd or anything.
I mean, also, isn't it like not just a one-time thing, too?
Yes.
It's like an ongoing thing.
It is ongoing.
I mean, even if you did start it, I mean, you could still be saying whatever for like years to come.
Yes.
I mean, because
there's any situation at schools.
right.
Yeah.
Ongoing thing. If it's just this one-time thing, then I mean.
Yeah, I guess it's the initial thing that I'm
Just the
concerned
initial.
about. Afterwards,
Yeah.
And they might know a lot more than you think too. Right?
Yes. So let me just close with this: is that because of our culture, there's also all of the trappings that come with sex obsession, which is what beauty is. And I'm really sorry to say, but your daughters will be challenged with that. And some of that comes with, say, for example, recognizing that, I looked up a statistic just because for this class, and I'm always cautious, I'm really extra cautious about typing in certain things into Google because of the way that I phrase it. But I wanted to look up breast enhancement amongst teen statistics. I wanted to get a sense. And I mean, can you believe that there is a such thing? That you can actually get, breast augmentation as a teenager.
With the parents' consent, though, right?
Yeah, with the parents' consent.
But they can't get it without.
They can't get it without, but they can get it with.
Wow.
It's just so crazy that our parent would even consent to that.
I know, but it's happening. And in 2010, so this is 2010 statistics. The Academy of Plastic Surgery, they did put out a list of what were the top 4 plastic surgeries for teenagers. Number 1 was, guess what it was? Yes. It just, to me, it's like, I never really look at anyone's nose. Like, I never say, boy, you have an ugly nose. That person's nose they need surgery for that nose. I really don't. So it's mind-boggling that people are thinking, especially a teenager, this is a teenager. I need to fix my nose in order to be someone. The second is breast augmentation. And in 2010, there were 4,000 something breast augmentation surgeries amongst teenagers. I mean, that's a small number compared to actually the total number, but 4,000 girls are getting their breasts augmented as a teenager. I mean, that shows you what our culture is, what's happening. So I think you have, as a parent, and fathers, this is where fathers step in, and mothers, what you tell your daughter and what you show them, what your influence over them is. I hope their greatest understanding of their identity and their beauty is not external, but it's actually that which is within. It's not to say that they can't, fix their hair and enjoy it or wear a certain type of clothing. So it's more to say that that's not what defines them. And their face doesn't define them. Their body shape doesn't define them. Their weight doesn't define them. What defines them is their love of Christ and who He is. And you're constantly pressing them towards that end more than what they see. Because in this world, they see a lot. And it's unavoidable, especially for girls. So fathers, what you say is tremendous to your daughters. It's not just the time you spend, but how you address them, how you talk to them, how you engage them, how you compliment them, what you don't say, all those things. I think it's really important that we recognize that we influence our daughters tremendously, and you have a great responsibility for that. And so it's really important that we keep that in mind. We don't want our kids thinking about getting, what was number 3? Botox. And so one of the things that was a real question in this article is, why do you use teenagers need Botox? I mean, they don't have what I have, I mean, I have all these things, but their skin is totally smooth. So they're just buying into the culture, celebrity culture. That's driving a lot of what they view as beautiful, as acceptable, and they're learning it in school. We all know this. They learn in school and they learn in media. So we have to counteract that. But if you're just going along for the ride and you're absolutely actually leading them towards that end, eating disorders come in. And I tell you that, I've had more than one instance of counseling with young girls who have eating disorders. And it's incredibly sad. So eating disorders, and they're really great girls, but they still are already thinking, I'm too fat. They're not fat, but I'm thinking, I'm too fat. I gotta lose weight, because if I don't lose weight, then I'm not beautiful. And no one's gonna like me. It's really bad. So I don't want to put a damper on our time, but I do want to say that we have to get ahead of these things. And the way we do is first recognize that my child is not above this. I think you have to get to that place. If you think that your child is protected from this, you're in danger. You have to recognize that, no, I have a child, no matter how good they look on the outside, they're susceptible to this. And if I'm not actively engaging them and conversing with them, asking them embarrassing questions for myself that I feel weird about, if that is not constantly there, then it's very quite possible that there's going to be a hit in life. And you don't want a counselor or a rehab center to be the end goal of your child, your teenager. So I really want to urge you to weigh all these things. So remember what I was talking about, how deal with this stuff at 0 to 5, because if you don't, then you think it's hard at 0 to 5 where you're really tired. I guarantee you will, if you're facing some of this stuff at 13 to 18, which I've worked with parents who've actually dealt with that, they say the 0 to 5 stuff, give me that physical tired weariness any time of the day, because the emotional angst and inability to know where their teenager is now and how are they, they're trying to take their life, that they would much rather have that 0 to 5 tantrum. So I say this, what you're sowing, everything you're doing, do not give up. Have the long view. Have the eschatological view. And if you have that, God is going to do a tremendous work. Okay? Any last thoughts or questions?
I have a question. Sorry.
There's no need to apologize.
As far as like, parents again that have like older girls, because I feel like it's an innate thing for girls to want to be pretty, right? I mean, Stella, like, I don't even know when it started. Pre-walking. I don't, what I mean? It just starts,
brushing their hair.
Yeah, and wanting to wear dresses, wanting to, I struggle with how to praise her and shape that. You know what I mean? Because it's like, yes, you can build on, character things, but I mean, under 5, I feel like it's, but there's more of the twirling and, oh, that's so pretty, and the necklaces and all those other things. But, as they get past 5, there's more of the, I mean, I'm still trying to wrestle with how to shape all that.
May I share something about that I don't want to say is prescriptive at all. So please don't take this with a grain of salt. But when my, because I have 3 girls, right? So I've thought a lot about that stuff when they were really young. And some of you might know my philosophy on these things, so you might think I'm really radical. But my kids joke about it today. So I've never been a princess person. I'm not that person, period. What I mean by that is that, when all these little girls really like princess stuff and everything, I would just say to my girls, princesses, you don't need princess stuff. You really don't. They're not good. and I would tell them, I'd say, you know what? And I didn't mean this in a conniving way, but I would tell them, you don't need princess stuff because you're beautiful as you are. You don't need to be this concocted, I need to have this fairy tale princess dress with like this crown and tiara and wear makeup and and I'd say this to them when they're really young, because back then it was very easy to be like, oh, you're so cute. I felt that way towards my girls then when they're babies, So the funny thing is, they started growing up and they'd all say, I hate princess. They started saying, I don't, and they don't wear frilly things. And I mean, if you look at although Chris is slowly shifting. She wore a skirt on Sunday voluntarily. She never wanted to wear skirts. And so it's shifting. And I think for me, I just didn't want my daughters to think that beauty is based on what they wear. Or it's not to say that there's anything wrong with that per se, but I didn't want them to see that that's beautiful. And the reason is because I feel like that eventually fades. Eventually, the beauty is what they're going to feel like they're not beautiful anymore one day. And I've seen that actually in some girls where initially they're really thought of as cute as a cute baby, but as they grow, they're not so cute anymore. It happens, right? they're like, a baby can slowly turn into a not cute little kid. And it could be, some of that honestly is personality. It's amazing what a personality does to make someone cute or not cute. Because as they get older, you don't really care about what they look like. If they're a brat, you don't want to be around them, right? Even if they look cute. But if they're a kid who's really like respectful and just really kind-hearted, you're much more drawn to that kid. So for me, that's what I wanted for my girls. I wanted them to be a defender of the defenseless, someone who is respectful, honoring, who's going to be responsible. And that I always thought the beauty will come along with that, the physical part of it. And eventually they start wearing, like Elizabeth has been wearing nail polish more. And, then part of me thinks, oh man, but I like her when she's just playing soccer. So it's a balance. I'm not saying it's bad. And you're right. I think there is something to a girl wanting to wear, wear frilly things or look a certain way. I just think it's important for we as parents to make sure that they always know they're treasured for who they are, not for what they look like. It's just something we should be emphasizing over and over again. And I think it has to be the father. Because I think mothers will do that naturally to some extent. I think fathers, men, and especially Asian men, we have a hard time. It goes against our grain to do that. Doesn't it? Is it just me? Maybe this is truly maybe my area, but I don't hear a lot of guys. Some, I think, fathers. I think, Dan, you might be pretty good at that. At just really complimenting your daughters and really loving them, being more affectionate. I'm not like that. So it takes, and you might do that more naturally. For me, it just is really something I have to work at.
Yeah, I don't have to shower
I don't have to shower, but I feel a little like that. It is hard. It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, so no princess.
You know, it's so funny, like, when you look at kids, I mean, they're just so cute. You just end up saying it a lot, like, oh, like, you know, especially, like, as a compliment, oh, no, she's so cute, like, to their mother, or, you know, whatever. Just as a compliment, you know, you hear that a lot, and I mean, I probably still say that now, but you probably don't remember, a long time ago, when your daughter was really little, I remember saying, oh, she's so cute, and then you told me, oh, please don't say that she's cute. I don't really want her to hear that a lot. And there was like first time like, oh, like me hearing that? Like somebody saying, oh, don't say that.
Did she finish by saying, we want her to hear that she's a defender of the defense?
I think she said, I want her to say something else, but I can't remember.
And she's cute.
So yeah, I feel like there's the. Do you hold back? Do you know what I mean? There's that kind of.
No, I think you have to. My point has been that you should compliment your daughter about what she looks like. I just don't think it should be constantly. That's what defines her. You know.
I mean, if you do it too much, though, it will define her, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It does define her eventually. And you know what? She's hearing enough. She's going to hear enough of that from the world. Everything is about measuring that standard. Once she goes to school, and think about all the other girls. They're all acting like that. So that means that she's going to already be buying into that to some extent. And if it's being heard at home, at church, in school, does it shock us why so many girls have eating disorders and real serious problems, cutters? You know, thinking suicide and suicidal thoughts, where one girl is isolated because they look a certain way. Why there's plastic surgeries? Why girls are getting Botox in the teen years? It's absolutely crazy. So, or breast augmentation. What is that? That's just insane. This is our world. Anyway, I don't want to leave it at that. May I close with this and closing prayer? Is that you guys you're here, and that honestly, in and of itself, is perhaps, it's not the greatest thing you can do, but it says something about your hearts, which is that you want more for your kids, and you don't want it to be just simply about, I want my kids to go to Harvard and win a beauty pageant and marry Prince Charming and, become a rocket scientist. And so I think I want my son or daughter to love the Lord with all his heart, soul, mind, and strength. To be like Joshua, who says, even if all else turn away, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And if that's your heart, and you parent in this way, you will see it happen. Not because of your parenting, but because God is a gracious God. He's going to hear your prayers. He will lead and direct you. And He will lead and direct you even when you mess up, which is pretty much many times out of the day. And that's good news. That's why Jesus gave His life for us. And He's a merciful God. So pray for us. Father, just thank you for these past 9 weeks. And sure, there are many things that I've personally said that have not been exactly where it should be. But again, it's every reason why we need a Savior, and it's also why, Jesus, you are the only one who can really lead people to yourself, and especially our kids. Lord, we live in a world where you read the paper or the news websites, and it's incredibly frightening to think that our children and our grandchildren will be facing some challenges in this world that are mind-boggling and incredibly fearful. But we're also reminded that he who is within us is greater than he that is in the world. That those who know the truth will set us free. And we have so much in Christ. So I thank you for these men and women, both here in this room as well as those who are watching online, that you would equip them, encourage them. May they not be afraid. Pray that especially, Father, for the fathers who are listening, that you would give them confidence in you. May they not shirk back on their responsibilities. May they be able to love you above all else, and by doing so, really care for their children. For the moms, oh Lord, I know that so many of them are perhaps really busy with life, some working, and some just simply having the challenges of having very young children, and it can be quite challenging. I ask that you would give them extra measures of your grace. And I pray for those of us who are in the teen years of our children as they're now getting ready essentially to leave the home. We've done all we can do, but we have much more to do, which is to pray, to converse, to wait, to trust, and to really seek after your heart, and to love our youth and eventually our adults our adult children who will go into this world and we hope make a difference and become truly the salt and light. And so I thank you for our time together, and we worship you and praise you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Allowance or no allowance? I heard both.
I don't think there is an answer to that question.